My name is Danielle Morgan, 32 years old, living in a quiet, tree-lined suburb north of Denver, Colorado. For nearly a decade, my life has been woven into the fabric of our family's business, Morgan and Company. Construction. In my mind, there was never a plan B, only a single, unwavering path to become the rightful successor to the legacy my father, Franklin Morgan, built from the ground up. The scent of sawdust and wet plaster is more familiar to me than any perfume. It was the scent that clung to my father's work shirts when he'd come home, tired but satisfied. By the time I was 8, I could distinguish a structural blueprint from a three-dimensional rendering. At 12, I spent a sweltering summer answering phones at the front desk, my voice still a high-pitched imitation of professionalism, and organizing invoices in the cavernous, dusty accounting room. Whenever a client would compliment my diligence, my father would place a heavy, proud hand on my shoulder and laugh, a rumbling sound that filled the small office. "This one's got the business in her blood," he'd say. Just like someone I know. He was a man of few sweet words, but the way his eyes met mine in those moments felt like a solemn promise, a silent contract between us. One day, this will all be yours. That unspoken promise took root in my heart and became the quiet engine that drove my every decision. While my friends filled their journals with dreams of becoming astronauts or fashion designers, my single-minded ambition was to elevate Morgan and Company into the preeminent civil construction firm in Colorado. I respectfully declined 3 lucrative job offers from top-tier infrastructure design firms in Seattle, Houston, and Atlanta, all before I'd even walked across the stage to receive my degree in construction management. The Monday after graduation, there was no celebratory trip, no brief respite. I walked into my father's office, hung my coat on the hook that had been waiting for me, and sat down at the project coordinator's desk as if I were born for it. I was the one who flicked on the office lights on snowy winter mornings, my breath fogging in the cold air, and the last one to lock the door at night during the final push before a contract deadline. During our busiest seasons, the worn leather couch in my office became my bed, a stack of blueprints my pillow. I memorized every major client's history, their children's names, their wedding anniversaries, even their preferences for kitchen countertop materials. I was the one who spearheaded the monumental task of digitizing our entire record system, dragging our company out of an era of paper ledgers and into the streamlined efficiency of the cloud. The project tracking software I researched and implemented cut our execution delays by nearly 40%. In the 4 years following those changes, our revenue nearly doubled. My name wasn't on the company sign that swung in the wind outside, but my fingerprints were on nearly everything within its walls. My personal life was a ghost, a series of faded photographs of a world I no longer inhabited. The 2 most significant relationships I'd ever had withered for the same reason, the final words echoing in different apartments but carrying the same tune: "You love that company more than you'll ever love me." Perhaps they were right, but in my heart, I believed I was tending to something greater, something that would outlast a fleeting romance. I wasn't working for a paycheck or a promotion. I was working for the future of Morgan and Company, for the unwavering belief that my sacrifice was an investment in the position I was destined to inherit. My small apartment was merely a place to shower and change. Old friends eventually stopped calling after the 10th time I'd regretfully declined, my voice strained with fatigue. I'm finalizing an estimate. I missed my best friend's wedding because I was locked in a tense, 3-day negotiation for a $1 million contract with a luxury resort developer. I felt a pang of regret, but I buried it. Every sacrifice, I told myself, was another brick laid in the foundation of the future I deserved. No one forced me to stay late. No one had to ask me to skip Thanksgiving dinner to drive out to a site and inspect the newly poured concrete foundations. I chose that path freely, consciously, because I believed I was the chosen one. My father, with his steady gaze, his gruff words of approval, and his years of quiet confidence in me, had planted that belief so deep it had become part of my own DNA. I truly thought that if I just kept my head down and worked, one day he would place the keys to the company, the keys to his heart, to his legacy, into my hand. But I had forgotten one crucial, devastating detail. In my family, love was conditional, and trust was a commodity that could be silently reallocated. I still remember the day my sister came home. It was a gray, overcast Tuesday in April. I had just finished a grueling quarterly budget presentation with the finance board, my mind still swimming in spreadsheets and projections, when my phone vibrated. It was my mother. She never called during work hours. A knot of concern tightened in my stomach as I answered. "Danielle, honey, your sister's home. Can you come for dinner tonight? It's been so long. The whole family should be together." I froze, my hand still gripping the pen I'd been using to make notes. My sister, Savannah Morgan, 34 years old. The golden child, the prodigal daughter my parents spoke of with a wistful, bittersweet ache in their voices. The one who had dropped out of college her senior year to chase a dream of becoming a photographer in Prague. The one who had drifted from Lisbon to Bali to New York, never putting down roots, a beautiful, ephemeral creature who had missed nearly a decade of Thanksgivings, Christmases, and birthdays. And now, without warning, she was back. That evening, I sat across from her at the familiar oak dining table of my childhood home. My mother had made my favorite honey-glazed chicken, though she made a point of announcing it was a celebration for both her daughters. Savannah was the picture of effortless grace in a flowing white linen dress, her sun-streaked hair casually swept into a messy bun. She carried herself with an unshakable confidence, as if she had never known a moment of doubt or struggle in her life. "You're doing amazing work, Danny," she said, tilting her head with an easy, practiced smile. "Dad talks about you all the time. He says you're a brilliant manager, that the clients adore you, that you're the one who keeps this whole machine running." I managed a polite smile in return. "Thanks. Every company needs someone to keep the wheels greased." "Of course," she said, her eyes sparkling with an idea I couldn't yet decipher. "But I think every machine could also use a little bit of magic. A creative spark." I didn't understand what she meant until the following Monday. My father called me into the small, glass-walled meeting room adjacent to his office. Savannah was already there, leaning against the credenza, a fresh cup of coffee in her hand, looking as if she had always belonged there. "Danielle," my father began, his voice taking on a formal, presentational tone. "I'd like to introduce Savannah in her new role. Starting today, she'll be our brand creative director. She's going to help us reshape our company's identity, from our presentation decks to the website, even how we approach new clients. The market is changing, and I believe it's time we evolved with it." I looked from my father's honest face to my sister's serene smile. She met my gaze without flinching, but as she took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, I felt a chill snake down my spine. I didn't protest. I simply nodded, my expression carefully neutral. "That's fine," I said, my voice even. "I'll let the design team know to coordinate with her." But inside, something vital and long-held had cracked. For 8 years, I had carried the operational weight of this company on my shoulders. I had refined workflows, extinguished financial fires, and navigated us through the treacherous waters of a global pandemic. I had never once been given a formal introduction, a grand announcement. I was given tasks, and I executed them. No spotlight, no fanfare. Within a month, Savannah had become the darling of every meeting. Our presentations, once stark and functional, now bore her signature touch, a softer, more aspirational color palette, a playful, modern font for our logo. My father, the same man who had once stubbornly refused to update our antiquated domain name because the old one works just fine, now praised her vision in public forums. "Savannah has brought a breath of fresh air to Morgan and Company," he'd declare. He even began referring to us as the perfect succession duo, a phrase meant to be diplomatic, but which only served to dilute a role that I had always believed was mine and mine alone. Savannah would drift into the office around 9:30 and be gone by 4. Her lunch breaks stretched to 90 minutes, often documented on her Instagram with artistic photos of avocado toast captioned with hashtags like #FamilyBusiness, #CreativeFlow, and #BuildingDreams. I said nothing because I had to admit her changes were effective. 2 of our recent model home unveilings had received glowing press, thanks in large part to her elegant staging and compelling visual narratives. But a bitter pill lodged in my throat every time I watched my father turn to her in a meeting, his eyes alight with excitement, and ask, "Savannah, what's your take on this?" I was still the one poring over contracts, preparing quarterly reports, and mediating disputes in the HR department, but his gaze had shifted to where the ideas were shinier, the colors brighter. I began to feel like a trusty, reliable old tool, still respected for its function but overshadowed by the allure of a brand new, high-tech gadget. Savannah was the shiny new investment, the one with all the upside. I didn't complain. I just worked harder. But each night, as I sat alone in my quiet apartment, I found myself reopening old files, reviewing past financial reports, and rereading archived internal emails. I needed to understand. Had I missed a sign? A shift in the wind? I didn't know what I was looking for then, but somewhere deep inside, a seed of doubt had been planted, not just doubt in my sister's sudden ascent, but in every promise I had ever believed within the walls of the house that bore the Morgan name. I don't know what compelled me to linger in my father's office that afternoon. Perhaps it was a flicker of intuition, a gut feeling honed by years of navigating the subtle undercurrents of the family business. Or perhaps it was the brief, almost imperceptible glance that passed between my father and Savannah that morning when I'd asked about the status of the Everpine townhouse contract, the crowning achievement of my career. A project I had nurtured from a mere whisper of an idea into a tangible, multi-million-dollar reality. Dad already sent the original to the legal team for the final signing, Savannah had said, her voice a little too bright, a little too quick. You can check the scanned copy on the server. But there was no scanned copy on the server. I had checked 3 times. And I knew, with the certainty of long experience, that my father never, ever sent an original contract out without first making a hard copy for our own files. It was his golden rule, a mantra he had drilled into me since I was a 12-year-old intern. So I went down to the basement archives, a place of cool, dry air and the comforting scent of old paper. Only Eleanor, the firm's long-serving office manager, and my quiet confidant, and I still knew the quirks of this subterranean library, which file drawers jammed, which boxes were mislabeled from a long-ago move. I began to search, pulling open heavy metal drawers, my fingers flipping through stacks of old documents, looking not just for the Everpine contract, but for something else, a missing piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving. And then I saw it. Tucked away between a 2009 land transfer deed and a 2013 bank loan agreement was a thick, black-bound document with no label on its spine. My curiosity piqued, I pulled it free. The cover page was stark and simple, share transfer agreement, Morgan and Company. Construction. The date at the bottom read April 17th, just 4 months ago. I opened it and the words on the first page seemed to leap out and strike me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Transfer of 72%, 72% of all shares held by Franklin A. Morgan to Savannah R. Morgan. Remaining 18%, 18% to be retained by Franklin A. Morgan. 10%, 10% to Linda R. Morgan. My name was nowhere. Not in a footnote. Not as a beneficiary. Not a single share. I read it again, my mind refusing to process the clinical, legal language. This couldn't be right. It had to be a draft, a hypothetical, a mistake. But the document was cold and real in my hands, each page bearing the weight of official stamps, notarized signatures, and an irrevocable date. There was no mention of a temporary proxy, no provisional clauses. It was a complete and total transfer of power. My hands turned to ice. The walls of the archive room seemed to close in, the air growing thick and heavy. I had to grip the metal shelving to keep my knees from buckling. A soft knock on the door made me jump. It was Eleanor. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked gently. I turned to face her, the document still clutched in my hand. Our eyes met, and in hers I saw a flicker of hesitation, then a deep, unmistakable sorrow that looked painfully like guilt. "You knew," I whispered, my voice ragged. I held up the folder. "How long have you known?" She didn't answer immediately. She sighed, a weary, defeated sound, and stepped inside, quietly closing the door behind her. "Your father was going to tell you, Danielle." After things had settled with Savannah's new role. He thought you would understand." "Understand what?" My voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "Understand that he secretly gave the entire company to my sister? The sister who hasn't set foot on a construction site in her life? Who has been back for less than a year?" Eleanor looked at me, her eyes filled with the pity I didn't want. "Danielle, this isn't about you doing something wrong. And it's not really about Savannah. Your father, he believes the company needs a new direction. He thinks you're too stuck, too rigid in the old ways." Stuck. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips. I kept this company afloat through a recession, a pandemic, and a dozen near-fatal financial blunders that he caused. You call that being stuck? She remained silent, her silence a confirmation of my worst fears. I brushed past her, the black-bound betrayal clutched in my hand, and stormed up the stairs, my vision blurred with a rage so cold and clear it felt like a physical force. I don't remember the drive home, but when I stumbled out of my car in the garage, I was still holding the folder. Cold sweat trickled down my back, my palms slick. I collapsed into the armchair in my living room and turned off my phone, severing my connection to the world that had just crumbled around me. Outside, the city began to light up, a million tiny points of life and hope, but I sat in the gathering darkness, consumed by a pain that burned without flame. I remembered every encouraging nod, every proud pat on the back, every time my father had said, "This future is yours, Danny." I had offered up my youth, my friendships, my chance at a life outside those office walls, all on the altar of that promise. And in return, I had received this, a notarized, legally binding erasure of my entire existence within the company. I held the document, my fingers itching to tear it to shreds, to destroy the evidence of their deceit. But I stopped. No, this was not something to be destroyed. This was evidence. A thought, at first a faint whisper and then a clear, solid resolve began to form in the ruins of my heart. If this company was no longer mine, then they no longer had any right to my labor, my expertise, or my loyalty. If they chose Savannah, then Savannah could bear the weight. I stood up, flicked on the lights, and opened my laptop. Not to work, but to plan my escape. I didn't sleep that night. Each line of the shared transfer agreement replayed in my mind, a slow, methodical dissection of a decade-long lie. For months. For 4 agonizing months, they had known. Every family dinner, every strategic meeting, every casual compliment my father had paid my sister had been a performance, a carefully constructed facade to keep me docile and productive while the ground was being sold out from under my feet. And I, like a fool, had continued to show up at 7 a.m. every morning, tackling the operational backlog left by the so-called creative director, still believing I was paving my own path to succession. They hadn't just given my future away, they had allowed me to continue building the road to my own exile. The next morning, I woke to a strange and profound emptiness. For the first time in years, my first instinct wasn't to reach for my laptop and check my email. I put on a simple black shirt and a pair of dark jeans, an outfit I would never have worn to the office, where my uniform was a rotation of professionally severe blazers and trousers. But today, I wasn't going in to perform. I sent a text to my mother, "I'll be there for dinner tonight. Please make sure everyone is present." Her reply was almost instantaneous, punctuated with a cheerful smiley face emoji. "Wonderful. Dad and Savannah will be here. I'll make your favorite beef stew." Perfect. I arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. The familiar red brick house with the white columned porch, the home where I had spent my entire childhood, looked the same as always, but today it felt alien, its welcoming warmth a cruel illusion. I didn't knock. I walked straight in. My mother, wearing her favorite floral apron, turned from the stove with a wide smile, her arms open for a hug. I allowed the embrace but didn't return it, my body stiff and unyielding. My father sat at the head of the dining table, pretending to read the newspaper as soft classical music drifted from the kitchen. Savannah was arranging silverware, a vision in a cream-colored silk blouse, her hair in a perfect, artful bun. "Danielle," my mother beamed. "Would you like a glass of wine?" Savannah offered, holding up a newly opened bottle of Cabernet. "No, thank you," I said, my voice cutting through the cozy domestic scene like a shard of glass. "I'd prefer to have a clear head for this conversation." The 3 of them froze. The music in the kitchen suddenly seemed loud and intrusive. My father lowered his newspaper, his eyebrows knitting together in a frown. I walked to the dining table, pulled out the chair opposite my father, and placed the black-bound folder squarely in the center of the polished wood. I opened it and turned it to face him, then said nothing. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to confront the evidence of their betrayal. Savannah's eyes widened as she read the first line, and a faint blush crept up her neck. My mother raised a hand to her mouth, a small, choked gasp escaping her lips. My father, a man who prided himself on his emotional control, went utterly still, his face a mask of stone. "I found it in the archives," I said finally, my voice calm and glacial. "It's a strange thing, isn't it? A decision of this magnitude, and not a single person thought I deserved to be informed." "Danielle," my mother stammered, wringing her hands in her apron. "Your father, he was going to tell you. When the time was right." "The right time?" A bitter laugh broke from my throat. "Were you waiting for the ink to dry? Or perhaps for me to be formally escorted from the premises before you deemed it the perfect moment?" My father slammed the folder shut. "You're being emotional." "Don't you dare speak to me about emotion," I shot back, my voice rising. "Not when you're the one who signed away my entire future." Savannah finally spoke, her voice soft and placating. "It's not what you think, Danny. You still have a valuable role at the company." "Valuable?" I scoffed, turning my glare on her. "I'm the one who dragged this company, kicking and screaming, through the last financial crisis. I'm the one who renegotiated the union contracts when they were about to strike. I'm the one who turned the disastrous Hillside project from a catastrophic loss into a marginal profit in 3 weeks. But the person who gets handed executive control is the girl who has been back for less than a year and once referred to our safety protocols as creativity stifling." The only sound in the room was the gentle bubbling of the stew on the stove. "Danielle," my father said, his voice stern, trying to reassert his authority. "Savannah brings a fresh perspective. She is creativity. You're too rigid. Too focused on the old ways." "I see," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. "So a decade of unwavering commitment is rigid. A deep, institutional knowledge of our operations is the old ways. But grainy, black and white photographs of doorknobs and light fixtures, that's the visionary future of Morgan and Company." Savannah lowered her head, for once having no witty comeback. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I looked at each of them in turn, my gaze lingering on my father. "I have one last question. If I hadn't found this document, would any of you have ever told me the truth?" The silence was my answer. "Thank you," I said softly. "That's all I needed to know." I picked up the folder. "This isn't a threat. It's a notification. As of tomorrow morning, I will no longer be an employee of Morgan and Company. Construction." "You can't," my mother cried, her composure finally breaking. "Danielle, you're the heart of the company." "No," I said, my eyes locked on my father's. "I was just a very reliable, very efficient part of the engine. And now, I'm removing myself from the machine." Then I turned and walked out of the house where my future had once been promised, and where it had ultimately been stolen. I thought that night would be a clean break, a final, dramatic exit like in the movies. But life is messier, its tendrils more tangled. 3 days after I had emailed my formal, two-sentence resignation, my phone rang. It was Eleanor. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "Danielle, I know you said you were done, but I think you need to see this." I hesitated, the familiar pull of responsibility a phantom limb I hadn't yet learned to ignore. "I don't work there anymore, Eleanor." "This involves you directly," she insisted. "They're presenting the Everpine project to the investors this afternoon." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Everpine was my masterpiece, the culmination of 2 years of meticulous planning, late-night research, and passionate belief. I had presented the initial concept to my father back in February. He had dismissed it as too ambitious, financially reckless, and told me to get my head out of the clouds. But I had never deleted the files. The market analysis, the 4-phase rollout plan, the detailed budget projections, it was all saved on the server, a testament to a vision he had refused to see. That afternoon, I drove to the office, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. Eleanor met me at the back entrance, her face etched with worry, and led me to the small observation room adjoining the main conference hall. Through the one-way glass, I saw Savannah. She stood at the head of the table, a remote in her hand, her voice radiating a confidence she hadn't earned. "The Everpine project," she began, her eyes sweeping over the assembled investors, "is a visionary approach targeting young families in the southern suburbs. We envision a community that blends sustainable design with flexible, communal living spaces. Our proposed strategy involves a 4-phase implementation over 26 months, with a capital allocation of 30, 40, and 30% respectively." My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just my idea. It was my exact presentation. My words. My financial model. My timeline. The slides on the screen were even the same shade of mint green the first had painstakingly chosen. Only one detail was different. In the bottom right-hand corner of every page, in a sleek, modern font, were the words, Savannah R. Morgan, Creative Director. I don't remember leaving the building. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my apartment, my body shaking with a fury so profound it felt like a sickness. I opened my laptop and pulled up my original files. Everything was there. The time-stamped drafts, the metadata listing me as the author. The evidence was irrefutable. My work hadn't just been used, it had been stolen and rebranded. That night, I called my father. "I need to meet you," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Not at the house. Not at the office." There was a pause. "Danielle, if this is about you reconsidering." "Tomorrow. 6 p.m. Darrow's Cafe on 5th Street, I interrupted. "Be there. Or I will be sending my entire project file, complete with creation dates and original drafts, directly to the Everpine Investment Group and their legal team. Your choice." The next evening, my father walked into the cafe looking haggard and tense. He was a man accustomed to giving orders, not receiving them. I pointed to the chair opposite me. "No greetings." I opened my laptop and turned it to face him. On the screen were two documents, side by side. My original presentation from 3 months ago and a video of Savannah's presentation from yesterday. "What is it you want, Danielle?" he asked, his voice low. "I want to know who gave my sister permission to plagiarize my work." He remained silent. "And if you're about to tell me this was a joint effort or a coincidence," I continued, leaning forward, "I will print out every email, every draft, every rejection notice related to this project and hand-deliver them to the investors myself." He finally broke, sighing heavily, his shoulders slumping. "Savannah was just expanding on an idea you had left behind." "She didn't expand. She copied. And you knew it." "It was a strategic decision," he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. "You are excellent at execution, but Savannah is better at presenting the vision. I wanted to combine your strengths." I scoffed. "You stole my intellectual property, slapped my sister's name on it, and you're calling it strategy? If this is the new business model for Morgan and Company, then you had better prepare for a lawsuit." "You wouldn't do that," he said, a flicker of his old, dismissive confidence returning. "You wouldn't destroy the family name." "Wouldn't I?" I pulled a small USB drive from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. "All the proof is on here. You have 2 days to make this right. After that, I go public, starting with a very detailed email to Everpine's CEO." He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. For the first time, he was seeing me not as his dutiful daughter, but as a formidable opponent. "What do you want?" he finally whispered. "First, Savannah's name is to be removed from that project immediately. Second, I want a formal, written apology from both of you." "That's not so simple." I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "Whether it's simple or not is no longer my problem. You have 2 days. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm not the girl who works under the fluorescent lights until midnight just for a pat on the head anymore. I walked out of the cafe, my hands trembling, but my spine was made of steel. In stepping out of my father's shadow, I was finally, painfully, reclaiming myself. For 2 days, there was nothing but silence. No calls, no emails, no desperate pleas. I began to think he had called my bluff. Then, on the 3rd morning, a text from Eleanor lit up my phone. "Everpine has withdrawn their offer. The CEO is asking to speak with the original project lead to confirm the company's status." Savannah is in a complete panic. "Your father hasn't come into the office." I sat in my sun-filled apartment, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. For the first time in a decade, the company's crisis was not my responsibility. But my connection to Everpine was personal. I had built a relationship of trust with their CEO, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Eleanor Wynne, over nearly 2 years of careful negotiation. When my personal cell phone rang at 9:18 a.m., I knew it was her. "Danielle?" Her voice was crisp and direct. "I need a straight answer. Are you still overseeing the Everpine project for Morgan and Company?" "I have resigned my position, Ms. Wynne," I said, my voice steady. There was a significant pause on the other end of the line. "I see," she said finally. "I also saw the presentation that was given last week. That was your work, was it not? The original framework you and I discussed months ago." I didn't need to answer. My silence was enough. In that case, She continued, "We have just sent a formal notice of contract withdrawal. My board will not sign a deal of this magnitude under false pretenses. We partnered with you, Danielle, not with a name on a building." After the call ended, I exhaled a long, slow breath. It wasn't a breath of relief, but of grim finality. I knew this news would detonate inside Morgan and Company like a bomb. That evening, as I was walking down the aisle of my local grocery store, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Danielle?" Her voice was thin and trembling. "Honey, can you please come home? The Everpine deal is dead, isn't it?" I asked, my tone flat. "It is," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Ms. Wynn called your father directly. Savannah, she can't handle this. She's completely falling apart." She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Your father, he's just sitting in his study. He hasn't said a word all day. And Eleanor told me 2 of our main subcontractors are threatening to pull their teams over payment delays." I remained silent. "Are you really going to stand by and watch everything your father built just fall apart?" she pleaded, her voice laced with a desperation that bordered on accusation. "I'm not the one letting it fall," I said slowly, deliberately. "You all made a decision. This is the consequence." "But this is our family's legacy," she cried. "No, Mom," I interrupted gently but firmly. "This is the legacy you chose to hand to Savannah. So let her be the one to preserve it." I ended the call. The next day, an email appeared in my inbox. It was from Savannah. The subject line was simply, "Please." The message was short. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking if you'll meet me. I was wrong. I can't justify what I did. I need to understand. I'll come to you, wherever you want." I didn't reply immediately. Later that night, while cleaning out a desk drawer, I found the first 5-year growth plan I had ever written for the company. I was 26, full of naive ambition. My father had glanced at it, tossed it aside, and said it was unrealistic. I looked at the crumpled paper, the passionate red ink, and I made a decision. I typed a reply to Savannah. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Maple and Pine Cafe." I didn't know what I would say to her. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not going back to save Morgan and Company. If it was to survive, it would have to learn to stand on the feet of the successor they had chosen. I had finally let go. And this time, there was no turning back. I arrived at Maple and Pine at 8 o'clock on the dot. The morning air was crisp, and the bell above the door chimed softly as I entered, the scent of roasted coffee and warm cinnamon filling the space. Savannah was already at a small table by the window, her hands wrapped around a cappuccino she hadn't touched. She started to stand when she saw me, but I gave a curt nod and sat down, making it clear this was not a social call. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice small. I said nothing, simply placed my phone face down on the table. I know I was wrong," she rushed on, as if she feared I would bolt at any moment. "The Everpine proposal was yours. All of it. I shouldn't have let Dad put my name on it. I was a coward, and I was swept up in it all, and now everything is collapsing, and I finally understand why." I remained silent, my expression unreadable, waiting for the true purpose of this meeting to reveal itself. Savannah swallowed hard. "Dad, he wants to ask you to come back." A humorless smile touched my lips. "Does he now? I suppose his fresh perspective and creative vision aren't quite paying the bills." Savannah flinched. "He didn't mean it like that." "Oh, I think I understand exactly what he meant," I said, my voice sharp. "And if he wanted to talk, he should have had the courage to call me himself." She looked down, her gaze fixed on the foam of her untouched coffee. I began to push my chair back, ready to leave, when her next words stopped me cold. He said if you agreed to come back, he would be willing to transfer some of his shares to you." I slowly sat back down. "How many shares?" "He suggested 15%, she whispered. "And the title of deputy executive." I laughed, a short, sharp, incredulous sound. "I'm not coming back to be the deputy to a failed creative director. If your father wants me to save his company, the price has gone up." I pulled a small notebook from my purse and flipped it open to a page where I had already outlined my terms. 40% ownership, I began, my eyes locked on hers. "A voting seat on the board of directors. The title of Chief Operating Officer with executive authority equal to or greater than yours. And full, undisputed control over the Everpine project, assuming it's even salvageable. 40%, she breathed, the number hanging in the air between us like an impossibility. I kept this company profitable for a decade. I navigated it through 3 major economic downturns. You've been here for 11 months and managed to nearly bankrupt it. I leaned forward. If this family wants me to rescue the legacy you all so carelessly discarded, you will pay my price. I am done working for free. She nodded slowly, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. She pulled out her phone. I'll tell him. 2 hours later, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered. It was my father. His voice was strained, stripped of its usual bluster. Danielle, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said coolly, until our lawyers are in the same room with a signed agreement. You're taking this too far, he protested, a flash of his old anger returning. No, Dad, I replied, my voice calm. I'm finally playing by your rules. There was a long silence. Then, a heavy, defeated sigh. Fine. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Harold's office. Bring your lawyer. I ended the call, my hand gripping the phone tightly. Not with fear, but with the exhilarating, terrifying feeling of control. The next morning, I walked into the mahogany-paneled office of Harold Vance, our family's longtime attorney. I wore a charcoal gray suit, my hair pulled back in a severe, professional knot. I carried a single, slim briefcase containing my terms and supporting documentation, project contribution reports, revenue growth analyses under my tenure, and letters of endorsement from 3 of our largest former clients. My father was already there, seated beside Harold. My mother sat slightly behind him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Savannah was conspicuously absent. Danielle, Harold began, his tone conciliatory. We have reviewed your terms. I met his gaze, my expression unwavering. Your father has agreed to them in principle. I nodded once. I want an agreement signed today. Otherwise, I have a preliminary meeting with the West Haven Group at 2 p.m. to discuss a partnership. My father's head snapped up. He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. You're not bluffing. I have never bluffed when it comes to business, Dad, I replied. And if you still don't understand that about me, then there is no point in continuing this negotiation. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. Slowly, he extended his hand across the wide, polished table. Let's start over. I looked at his hand, a hand that had once offered comfort and now represented a decade of hollow promises. I took it. Our handshake was brief, firm, and cool. It was not the handshake of a father and daughter. It was the handshake of 2 business partners closing a deal. The agreement was signed within the hour. 40% equity, transferred directly from his controlling shares. A voting seat on the board. The title of COO. Savannah would retain her 35%, my mother her non-voting 25%. I walked out of that law office with the signed papers in my briefcase, my head held high. I hadn't just reclaimed a position. I had established a new world order. 2 weeks later, I walked back into the offices of Morgan and Company. This time, there was a new brass plaque being installed on the wall of the executive suite. Danielle Morgan, Chief Operating Officer. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through relentless, back-breaking labor. My worth was now a matter of legal record. The company we were rebuilding was a mere shadow of its former self, but it was now built on a foundation of truth. Savannah, stripped of her operational authority, was confined to the realm of her actual expertise, branding and marketing. She reported directly to me. Our weekly coffee and context meetings were my invention. In them, I patiently walked her through the things she had never bothered to learn: how to read a balance sheet, how to analyze risk in a subcontractor bid, how to project material costs. At first, she was resistant. Why does everything have to be so complicated? She'd complained. Because, I replied without malice, this complication is what kept the lights on while you were taking photos in Bali. Slowly, she began to change. She started taking notes. She asked intelligent questions. Most importantly, she learned to listen. A month after my return, an email from Eleanor Wynne arrived. We are prepared to reopen negotiations on the Everpine project on the sole condition that it is managed, from start to finish, by Danielle Morgan. I printed the email and pinned it to the main bulletin board in the office. A hush fell over the room, followed by a spontaneous round of applause, not for me, but for the collective hope that we were back. My father receded into an advisory role, a figurehead with no real power. He came into the office 3 days a week, mostly sitting in his old office, reading reports he no longer had the authority to action. He was a king in a self-imposed exile, a ghost of a bygone era. I did not banish him. I simply drew a line. He could be my father, but he would never again be my boss. 3 months later, Morgan and Company re-signed the Everpine contract. Its scope expanded. Its value increased by nearly $2 million. 4 of our most important former clients returned to the fold. I sat in my new office, a space I had designed myself with clean lines, natural light, and a comfortable armchair where I could read contracts without my shoulders tensing. On the wall, I framed the first napkin sketch I had ever made for Everpine, a coffee stain still visible in the corner. Next to it, I framed Ms. Wynn's email. I look at them every day. They are my reminder. Your value is not determined by those who overlook you. It is determined by the standards you set for yourself and the courage you find to enforce them. I am no longer the forgotten daughter waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. I am Danielle Morgan, the woman who stopped waiting for power and built her own.